Hello, my friends. Kind of some really more interesting revelation of things. Um, and it's for a scenario that I'm not 100% sure of. But if it was the case, I can look through Scripture and I can make a claim that it be it, just based off of revelation in itself and how everything goes and is worded, and so many things about the book itself really makes it impossible for one to understand truly what it's speaking of unless you're given piece by piece breakdowns and even specific time periods of the breakdowns of things. So let's just say, for instance, for the sake of attempting to understand what is actually happening in the world, that the trigger that begins, or the trigger that ends the second woe and enters into the third woe. Let's just say that trigger did occur, that it was that earthquake that we just had in Turkey. Let's just say that for the sake of following around this. We know that the seventh seal, whenever it's open, there's a quietness in heaven, as it says, and the sixth seal is a great earthquake. So if you follow the scriptures at the end of Revelation chapter 11, we see that they are clearly talking about heaven, a place between the earth and us, a place that's separated by the veil. All these events are taking place up there, such as what happened with the two witnesses, perhaps why Enoch and Elijah were already raptured. Perhaps they went there to die and be resurrected. Who knows? We don't know exactly. We don't even know what happened with them specifically or what their purpose is, but that could be what their purpose is. It's just we didn't get to see that purpose with our own eyes here on earth. But let's just say, for the sake, that is what happened, and all this happened between the veil that we cannot see yet from earth. Now you put it into a situation where you're in that period between the ending of the second woe and the beginning of the third woe. And the beginning of the third woe is the tribulation period. You leave the ending of the second woe, which would be your period of sorrows. That period ends. Then there's a slight pause. And then you go right into the tribulation period, which goes all the way up through Revelation chapter 19. That's the third woe. And if we're walking this as that earthquake was the sign that's spoken of in Revelation 11 about the death of 7,000 men in 1 hour, a tenth of the buildings being destroyed in that 1 hour, then that puts it to a period of pause. But not pause as in a tarry period like it's been for the last 2,000 years, just a slight pause, because it says the second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. Jesus himself says it comes to a point in time where he will no longer tarry. He comes quickly. Christ comes quick. So we know that this is a very short window of time on earth, which would fit the actual physical signs that we see of the things happening with the celestial bodies. It puts you at a period of time that is coming quickly and passes by quickly, and things must happen during that period of time, or you never get that same window back. So all of these things come in succession, and Jesus says, for the sake of the elect, the times are cut short. And we know that that is indeed what happens at the end. So if that was the case, then the next thing we would expect to see, we already see, and the nations were angry, and thy wrath is come, and the time of the dead that they shall be judged, and that thou shouldest give us reward unto the servants, the prophets, and to the saints, and to them that fear thy name, small and great, and shouldest destroy them which destroy the earth. So the nations, you can look around, the perplexities of nations. They're in dread, and they know that there's war, disaster coming, and they're already being judged by the Lord separately from even their own upbringings. The nations know we've hit a period of time where destruction is imminent. You have King Jong-un that come out the other day and said, we're preparing for war. You have NATO preparing for all these. Every nation right now knows that the wrath is coming. And we of God understand that wrath is also coming. We understand that we're watching death in motion, the destruction in motion. It's somebody who recognizes that somebody's being led to the execution chair, but you can't talk them out of going to it. That's what it is to be a child of God right now. That's what we see. So the next thing that would be to come, when the temple of God was open in heaven, and there was seen his temple, the ark of his testament, this is New Jerusalem, and there were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail. So you're setting up a period that looks like the sixth seal, a great earthquake, something that leads on to the next phase of it. We have this earthquake be a trigger. The next trigger then would also be an earthquake. But when that earthquake triggers, you split the veil in half, just like as what happened with the curtain when Jesus was crucified. The curtain split in half. It's showing you that you couldn't see what was happening in the heaven, but now you will. Now you'll see it above you. That's a splitting of the veil. And just take a look at this, because this is very interesting, and it's going to apply to what I'll say after this. This was a photograph of Madonna taken just yesterday or whatever it is. That's the one that's on the left side. Notice she's wearing a suit and tie and just looks like a hideous creature of Satan, because that's what she is. And you look through all of her music videos of the past and what she does, she portrays herself as the Virgin. She is an unholy representative of the church, the bride. She is a representative of that unholy bride. And that this was just taken the other day. And then you see another picture here back in 2000 when she's wearing a necklace that says baby. So you're basically seeing that this woman is like a child, a harlot mother, all in the same package, just like Christ's people are his bride and a child of God, all in the same manner. This is all, everything that happens, you can see it happen in the world itself. It manifests in certain things for those who have the eyes to see it. And this is just something like that, where you can just picture Madonna as being what I'll speak about after this. So then, when the veil is torn in two, and mankind then sees what has been above us happening all the time, but we've never been able to see it, but we do now. And then there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, in pain to be delivered. Now this is what I'm saying about who's the woman in this picture? Who's the travailing woman in this picture? What have I said before about the birthing pains? How we can experience them for ourselves, happening to us as we walk. The woman in travail, you can look at her as the mother of God. And why does God show us this different image completely of ourselves? Why does he relate it to even Mary? Whenever they're telling Jesus, hey, where is your mother? And Jesus says, my mother, my brothers and sisters are those who believe in God. We're seeing ourselves from a different perspective. But it's also at the same time, Jesus did nothing that didn't have some kind of meaning towards it, for a warning of also something that was to come. What has the Catholic Church turned Mary into? And what have they done in the Vatican and with these miracles that they've spoken about? What have they hidden away as far as their prophecies go? That's like the Madonna version. The woman in the world who is those who believe in God. We're pregnant, even though we're a child and we're a bride at the same time. It's showing three qualities of man, like God is dividing himself into three qualities, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. You can see that woman is who fulfills this. But then there is another woman to come. As you see here, and there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them down to the earth. And that dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, to devour her, for as soon as that child was born. And she brought forth that child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. This is saying this is the deliverance of that pregnant woman in travail, that bride of Christ, that child of God. These ones belong to Jesus, who rules the nations. They're his and they're caught up to him. But the other woman represents the other side of this. And then the woman who had her place prepared for her, which is New Jerusalem, that's where she goes whenever God takes her up out of this world, that she should go to that place prepared for her for 1,260 days. And then there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought against his angels and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And that great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. And he was cast onto the earth, and his angels were cast with him. So you see at this time, when the veil is torn open, and we see what's up there, there is the rapture, as the church will call it. And then there is a deception that comes right with it at the same time, practically. This is the beginning of the third woe, the great tribulations. And why is it important to not follow those who follow other gods? This is why, and I'll show you this right here. There's a second woman talked about in the book of Revelation, chapter 17. And where she's sitting here is, so he carried me away in the spirit in the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her head was the great name written, Mystery Babylon Great, the mother of harlots and the abomination of the earth. You can look at that as a physical representation of the Statue of Liberty. That's how I know New York City is the city that brings this desolation. But the woman herself is not talking about that city. That's talking about the people who are in that city and who follow that woman, that false version of who God is. That's what's happening in Revelation 17. And if you go back to the second woman that's in Revelation 12, again, what Jesus said, Jesus replied, "Who is my mother and who are my brothers?" He points to them, the disciples, and said, "Here are my mother and my brothers, for whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." He says this specifically because he's saying, nobody, if anybody comes bearing a different gospel version of God other than me, you don't belong to the Father and you're deceived. My people, my mother, my brother, and my sisters are not those who come to deceive you claiming to be me, but they are those who know me and belong to me and come to me. So he's basically pointing out a deception that would occur, and what has already occurred in the world. Our Lady of the Sun Catholic Church. Remember what I've always said about the Catholic Church. This is what the whole world has come to know as Christianity in itself. And it was formed in Rome in 240, whenever every single denomination, every single revisit of the Bible by the scribes to write it down, it all came from the Catholic Church. And what came out of the Catholic Church? The Protestant churches and all their 20,000 denominations. So you see, this whole woman that started as this Catholic church then grew to spread out over the entire world to fill it up with all of her children, all the children of the harlot, even though they look at themselves and believe they hold the truth of God. They're nothing but deceived following the same church, even though it's called something different. The fruits are identical. And I'm not saying that these are people that won't be my mother and brother and sisters. People that go to church and go every Sunday, especially those like the woman who gave all that she had to the temple. Jesus made record of her for that, because though she gave little, she gave more than everybody else there, because that was a person of God that loved God so much. She went and sat in that temple and endured everything that happened there for the sake of his name. There are those that do that every week in church. For those ones, God will appoint and separate also, just as he did that woman. But for the rest, the lukewarm, the one that don't really know God but look to the church as their form of salvation, they are who is deceived by what comes. And you look at the miracle of the sun, also known as the miracle of Fatima, a series of events reported to have occurred miraculously on October 1917 and attended by a large crowd who had gathered in Fatima, Portugal, in response to the prophecy made by the 3 shepherd children. The prophecy was that the Virgin Mary, also referred to as Our Lady Fatima, would appear and perform miracles on that date, such as even making the sun appear to dance or zigzag, or even go backwards And what are we looking at in the earth that can testify for this? Well, according to the scientists now, the inner core has stopped spinning. Everybody's talking about a pole shift, so you're looking like a reversal. So what this shows you is a grand deception event at the same time as a deliverance event. And just imagine whenever the heavens above you open up and you see this image that comes as Mary, and you believe it because you've already believed it. The Catholics are going to be jumping for joy in that. They're going to say, we told you all that's God. We told you she was the one. It wasn't Jesus. We told you it was her. So they're automatically going to believe. And then you're going to have a lot of those Protestants who didn't really know God. They're also going to eventually believe because they're going to see it with their own eyes, and they love what their own eyes sees. You're going to have very few then amongst them who are going to be suspicious of this and say, this isn't right. But God gives them over to the delusion because they didn't follow him. They followed each other, somebody else, another God. They followed everybody else ahead of him. So he gives them over to the delusion. This is a supernatural kind of event, something that we cannot explain or even attest to right now because we haven't seen it. This event that takes place is not like every single day when we wake up and we're looking at things happening through the world representing the Spirit. This is actually that Spirit come to earth. And it's going to deceive the whole population that is left here. Other than a few. There will be a few left who will not soil their clothes with this. A few. And they're only kept here because of a testimony of God's word. There will be some from amongst them left on the earth that will not fall for this deception, even though they live in it. And they will become with the 144,000 and then go spreading the actual gospel with the help of God's angels, rather than the watchers and the messengers that come down from Satan. Because remember at that time too, Satan and all the angels are cast down. So you're going to see them with your own eyes the very same way that you would see the angels, for instance, flying around professing the gospel of Christ. You're going to see both. But the world's going to be completely deceived by the one. And once again, as I spoke about this a long time ago, it was one of the very first things that the Lord actually let me to recognize was this Fatima, the set of miracles that happened there. And I saw it and I understood the word and I read it and I could just see, yeah, whatever that third secret is that they're not telling people, it's going to be to set up the deception whenever the end comes. So people follow right into that deception rather than follow God. It's laid out clearly. And when the veil is torn in half, which should, if Revelation 11, if that sign was this earthquake, that tearing is very quickly, is soon ahead, because all the nations are already preparing for their war. People are already preparing for desolation. And everyone who knows God understands that the world is walking right to their execution, and it can't be stopped. So you're already right at that point where the tarry is gone and everything is to come soon. Right now, even at the door knocking, so Jesus describes it. And there's not much time left to do this. If that was the actual event that led to the ending of sorrows, that period ending that second woe and leading into the great tribulations, boy, we have very, very little time left till we will look up in the air for ourselves in the sky and see these things that have been up there the whole time that we haven't been able to recognize. And imagine what that day actually looks like. Imagine what all the nations do. And look what all the nations are doing right now. They're preparing and gathering for war. China's gathering for war. Russia's gathering for war. Europe's gathering for war. America's gathering for war. Everybody's already gathering for war, which is the first parts of the judgments of men. And it's all led by a supernatural event that then they're all going to build up their armies and go against God. I don't know what that day looks like. Have no clue. But I do know if all of this that matches up perfectly to what the scripture actually says, specifically the two women, then you understand that you don't want to be here on the earth after that event. You need to be up in New Jerusalem. You need to be taken up. Because then you enter into a period of time that mankind was never destined to be entered into, known as to us as the Great Tribulations. And the way out of that is here and now. Believe in the Lord. Call out to Him. Ask Him to reveal Himself to you. See yourself in a mirror. Understand that you fell short and that no matter what you've done, you don't need to be guilty and stand in front of God. He accepts you exactly as you are and you go to Him. That's it. But the time to do that, the ending of that grace period, it's here and now. For you don't know when you wake up tomorrow if anything else is going to be here just as it is today. We have no more time left. It's here and now. And the wise virgins will be ready on that day, while the foolish ones will not. God bless.